The bell rang once, hollow and slow, and Leora Bennett felt the sound settle into her bones. The small chapel was crowded, but the air felt empty, heavy with curiosity disguised as prayer. She stood at the front in a borrowed dress that smelled faintly of lavender and dust, too loose at the shoulders, too tight around the fear she could not hide. She counted the distance to the door without meaning to. 11 steps. Just 11. Her feet stayed rooted, not because she lacked courage, but because courage does not cancel consequences. Every bench behind her held someone who already knew her story and had decided how it should end. Across from her stood Marcus Hall, a man she had seen only once before today. Tall, quiet, older than her by years and experience, he looked less like a groom and more like a man bracing for weather. His hands rested calmly at his sides, as if stillness were the only shield he trusted. Leora expected hardness when she met his eyes, something cold or claiming. Instead, she saw restraint, not kindness, not cruelty, just a deliberate distance, like someone choosing not to step closer even when allowed. The minister's voice moved through the room, but the words slid past her, promises spoken for her. A future shaped without her fingerprints. Her mother sat rigid in the second row, lips pressed together, eyes shining with shame and relief tangled into one expression. The debt had arrived quietly, like rot under floorboards. Medical bills, failed harvests, a lender who smiled too often. The solution came with conditions, wrapped in polite language and legal certainty. No one had asked Leora what she wanted. They had only told her what was necessary. When the question finally came, the room leaned forward as one body. Leora's throat tightened. "I will," she said. Not loud enough to echo, but loud enough to seal everything. The words felt heavier than chains, because chains could at least be seen. When it was Marcus's turn, he surprised everyone. "I choose to," he said, instead. Not rehearsed, not soft. Chosen. A ripple moved through the chapel, confusion dressed as disapproval. Leora's heart stumbled, unsure whether to fear or hope. Outside, the wind cut sharp and clean. Marcus did not touch her at first. He opened the carriage door and waited, allowing silence to exist without pressure. When she stepped down, his hand hovered, ready but not demanding. The ride away from town felt longer than it was. Houses faded. Roads narrowed. Fields stretched wide and empty. Leora stared ahead, bracing for rules she assumed would arrive with the first mile. "You're safe here," Marcus said finally, not looking at her. The words were plain, almost uncomfortable in their honesty. She did not answer. Safety had always come with conditions. Before, the house they reached stood solid and weathered, not grand but enduring. Light glowed from the windows. Warmth waited inside, unannounced. Marcus showed her the rooms without ceremony, explaining only what she needed to know, nothing more. Upstairs, he stopped at a closed door. "This room is yours," he said. "It locks from the inside. Use it whenever you want." He placed the key on the table and stepped back, as if crossing another inch would break something fragile. Leora locked the door as soon as he left and slid to the floor, pressing her palms against the wood. She was married, sheltered. Yet the shaking in her hands told her how little certainty those words carried. Downstairs, Marcus ate alone. He wrapped bread in cloth and left it outside her door without knocking. The simple gesture unsettled her more than cruelty would have. Kindness demanded response. Cruelty asked nothing. Morning arrived quietly. No footsteps, no expectations waiting outside her room, only sunlight and the smell of coffee drifting upward. She realized, slowly, that no one was watching her choices. In town, whispers traveled faster than truth. She heard them through passing glances and lowered voices when Marcus's name was mentioned. Bought, traded, settled. The words stung, but they did not come from him. That evening, they sat at opposite ends of the table. Marcus asked what she preferred to eat. The question was small, but it landed heavy. Choice, offered without cost, felt unfamiliar. Leora studied him carefully then, searching for ownership, for expectation, for entitlement. She found none, only patience. Only space. And for the first time since the bell had rung, she wondered if this marriage, built on necessity and silence, might become something shaped by choice instead of fear. Days passed in a careful rhythm, like footsteps on thin ice, never rushed and never fully still. Leora learned the sound of Marcus's boots at dawn, and the way he paused before entering any room, as if announcing himself without words. The house no longer felt like a shelter borrowed from fear, but it was not yet a home either. She filled her hours with small, quiet tasks, organizing shelves, tending the neglected herb patch behind the house, learning the geography of a life that had been chosen for her but not yet claimed by her. Marcus never corrected her, never redirected her hands, only watched with a distance that felt intentional. The town, however, did not share his restraint. When Leora rode beside him into town for supplies, conversations softened into whispers the moment they passed. Eyes lingered too long. Smiles thinned. Judgment moved like fog, impossible to grasp, but heavy enough to feel. At the market, a woman she barely knew leaned close and murmured, "At least you landed well," as if Leora were a parcel delivered safely. The words burned, not because they were cruel, but because they were casually accepted as truth. Marcus noticed the stiffening of her shoulders before she spoke. He paid for their supplies, thanked the shopkeeper, and guided her outside with a calm hand hovering just short of contact, offering support without claiming it. On the ride home, Leora finally asked the question that had pressed against her chest for days. "Why are you so careful with me?" Her voice held no accusation, only confusion sharpened by fatigue. Marcus took a long breath before answering. "Because force already brought you here," he said. "I won't be the reason you feel trapped again." His honesty carried no pride, only a quiet resolve that made her look at him differently. That night, a storm rolled in without warning, wind rattling windows and thunder shaking the beams. Leora woke with her heart racing, old fears rising fast and sharp. Before she could stop herself, she opened her door and stood in the hall, unsure what she was asking for. Marcus was already awake, sitting near the fire downstairs, as if he had been waiting for the house to breathe again. He looked up when he heard her step, surprise flickering before gentling into concern. "You don't have to be alone tonight," he said, careful even now. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, warmth filling the space between them without closing it. The storm raged outside, but inside, something steadier began to form, built not on touch, but on presence. The next morning brought a letter sealed with the town council's mark. An invitation, polite in words and sharp in intention, requesting their attendance at a public gathering meant to welcome Leora properly. Marcus folded it once and set it aside, his jaw tightening. "We don't have to go," he said. Leora studied the paper, then shook her head slowly. "If we keep hiding, they'll decide our story for us," she replied. The certainty in her voice surprised them both. At the gathering, the room felt smaller than it was, crowded with expectation. Conversations halted as they entered. Leora felt the weight of every unspoken assumption settle on her shoulders, but she stood straighter than before. A man laughed too loudly near the back, making a comment about debts being paid in unusual ways. Before Leora could react, Marcus stepped forward, his voice low but steady, slicing cleanly through the noise. "You speak about my wife with respect, or you don't speak at all." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Leora felt something shift inside her, not because she needed defending, but because he had chosen to stand with her publicly, without hesitation. On the way home, she finally let herself exhale. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Marcus met her eyes briefly. "I wanted to," he replied. The difference mattered more than either of them said. That evening, Leora cooked dinner without asking first. Marcus noticed and smiled faintly, as if witnessing a quiet declaration. They ate together, conversation tentative but real, sharing fragments of past lives without probing too deep. Later, Leora found an old photograph tucked into a drawer, Marcus younger, standing beside a woman and a small child. When she asked, he did not hide the truth. Loss, spoken plainly, without drama, without armor. "I didn't think I could care again," he admitted, not without losing something else. Leora listened, understanding more than she could explain, realizing they were both standing on the edge of something fragile and unfinished. That night, she left her door open. Just a crack, enough for lamplight to spill into the hall. Marcus noticed as he passed and said nothing, respecting the offering for what it was, a step taken freely, not owed. Winter settled over the valley with a patience that felt deliberate, covering old paths and sharp edges alike. Leora learned the rhythm of colder days, the way the house creaked at night, and how Marcus always left the porch lamp burning until she was asleep, never asking if she noticed. The town did not soften all at once. Judgment rarely does. But it grew quieter. People watched instead of whispered, waited instead of assumed. Leora sensed the shift before she could name it, like the moment before ice begins to crack under spring light. One evening, Marcus placed a folded document on the table between them. He did not speak until she had finished reading. The land, a portion of the property, transferred into her name alone, without conditions, without expectation. Her hands trembled as she looked up. "This isn't payment," he said calmly. "It's choice. You stay because you want to, or you leave without losing anything." The room held its breath, not because of the offer, but because of the freedom inside it. Leora spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, weighing fear against possibility. Leaving would be easier. Staying would mean risking hope. By dawn, she understood that safety without belonging felt like another kind of cage. She found Marcus in the yard, repairing a fence that did not need fixing. He looked up when she approached, uncertainty flickering through his calm. She handed the papers back without a word and picked up the loose wire beside him. "I'm not staying because I owe you," she said softly. "I'm staying because I choose this life." Marcus nodded once, swallowing something heavy and unspoken, and together they finished the fence as the sun climbed higher. Spring came slow but determined. The ground softened. Leora planted trees where she imagined shade would one day fall. Marcus watched from a distance, never directing, only supporting when asked. When the town council called a meeting about land boundaries and water rights, Marcus stood, but Leora stepped forward first. She spoke clearly, without anger or apology, claiming her place with calm authority. The room listened. Later, an older woman approached her outside, eyes lowered. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. Leora smiled, not in triumph, but in release. Vindication mattered less than peace. That night, Marcus admitted something he had not said aloud before. "I waited too long to believe life could be rebuilt," he said. "I thought loss meant the end." Leora reached for his hand, steady and sure. "Waiting isn't the same as giving up," she replied, "but choosing now matters." The firelight caught in his eyes, and for the first time he allowed himself to lean fully into the moment. Summer brought laughter, unexpected and real. Shared meals, quiet evenings on the porch. Touch no longer felt dangerous, only earned. Love did not arrive like a storm, but like something planted and tended. One afternoon, Leora found the old lock from her bedroom door resting on a shelf, unused. She smiled and set it aside, knowing it had served its purpose when she needed it most. When the church bell rang again months later, it sounded different. No pressure, no audience hungry for spectacle. Just a reminder that time moved forward whether fear followed or not. Leora and Marcus sat together in the open field as the sun dipped low, the house behind them glowing warm and familiar. The door stood open, not because it had to, but because it could. "Do you ever regret saying yes that day?" Marcus asked quietly. Leora considered the question carefully. "I regret that I wasn't given a choice," she said, "but I don't regret what I chose after." He nodded, understanding settling deep. Success, safety, respect, none of it mattered without someone choosing to stay, not out of obligation, but out of belief. As night fell, they walked inside together, not as strangers bound by circumstance, but as partners who had rebuilt something fragile into something real, and in the house where fear once waited quietly in locked rooms. Loud remind, not because it was forced, but because it was finally chosen.